4 points. You will get a chance to rest, but I think you'll be okay just resting on the carpet bit. You will get a chance to rest in the ATM, but I don't want your mats on the floor. So I'm just saying, when you rest, it'll be making do with carpet. Talk to Jen. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't, yeah. So, no, that was Di's, but Jen, see if it's compatible with Jen's computer. How did you go the other day with socks on? Yeah? Socks often give some of us a little bit more, we don't stick quite as much. So feel free to leave your socks on if you like. If you felt like you were slipping around, just get on the carpet. Have a walk around. How much of you do you involve in your image of walking at the moment as you scan through? What parts do you have maybe a little tiny habit about the parts of yourself that you normally pay attention to in walking? So how easy, as you're walking at the moment, is it for you to move your torso around your hips and your shoulders? To move your torso in relationship to your hips and your shoulders. So if you think of those great big circular joints of your hips and your shoulders, and then pause wherever you are in standing. And feel in standing, if you are just going to, with thinking of your head or your skull, you're just going to flex it a little bit, which means it's going to go forward and down a little bit, and extend it. Just get a sense of where do I do that from? I'm not trying to change it, but if I'm just going to move my head, my skull, a little bit into flexion or extension, where do I do that from? And how much does the rest of me, how much of the rest of me is ready to follow along with the movement of my head? And pause. And then do that again. Just a little bit, flexing and extending your head. And feel, does anything happen in my hips and shoulders when I do that? And see if you can begin to sense that if your hips and shoulders are moving, that absolutely demands that your torso moves. Then could you do the same movement again, small movement of taking your head a little to the left or a little to the right. Feeling how much you include in your image of your head there, the back of your head, the top of your head, the sides of your head, the front of your head. And where do you do this movement from? How high up in your spine do you feel your right ear goes down toward the right, and then your left ear goes down toward the left. So this side bending movement of your head. And do your hips and shoulders follow that movement? So it's not a turning, Sue, it's a side bending. Side. Yeah. So how do your hips and shoulders respond? And is it different going to the left than the right? And come back to the middle and pause again. Now we're going to do yours, Sue. Okay? So now, turning a little to the right, so you're rotating, and a little to small, 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 small. Because what I want you to feel is, where do you connect your head to? So it's just the beginning of the movement. You're going to turn your head, and that's the instruction, not turn your pelvis, not turn, they might all go along, but to do this very small movement of turning your head. Where do you do it from? And do your hips and shoulders respond? Okay. Have a walk again. So did that change or not? Anything in your walking? Does anything feel different in your neck? In the way your head's sitting on top of your neck? Because again, as we've been looking at with development, the more organized we get, that more and more we can keep our head in the middle and everything moves under it. Doesn't mean that's how we always move, but that's telling us probably we're getting a little more organized. So now, pausing in standing and allowing your neck to soften any direction you want, and begin to find your 4 points on the floor. Where are they today? So not looking up, really feeling I can let my head go. And find your 4 points. So your 4 points are absolutely personal to you. No one else will have your exact 4 points. And your 4 points are based on your structure, your proportions, So let's start. So we're going to see if we can get more familiar with where our 4 points could be, where our personal 4 points could be. So could you, as you're on your 4 points, simply and lightly, small movement, lift your right hand away from the floor. Just small movement, just your right hand and put it down again. And feel how much do the other 3, you've got to shift your weight, obviously, but how much do they have to adapt? Do you feel you really have to do a really big weight shift? And then lift your left hand. So this is wherever you've found your 4 points at the moment. And it's just a very light lift. You just bend your elbow a little bit. You lift it up. Your right foot. So you could just bend your knee a little, lift your foot, and your left foot. So if any of those aren't easy, this isn't your 4 points yet. It's just that's all it is. You haven't found your 4 points because you will have them. So play around a little bit. Just what you're looking for is, where do I want my hands and feet? How far apart do I want them, so that I don't have to lift another one away from the ground or really take a lot of the weight off it? That I can really find, where would I have them? Would they be further apart? Would they be closer together? So that I can just lightly lift one of these at a time without feeling that I'm really having to lose one of the other points at the same time. And is the one of your limbs that it tends to be more likely that it's going to make you shift more? Okay, stand up. So that's lifting one at a time. Just finding these 4 points are dependent on me finding in my own spatial orientation, my own organization, where I can organize to lift any of these, and I don't have to start to lift another one off the ground as well. So go back into your 4 points again. Now you're going to lift your right hand and your right leg at the same time. So we're going to give you another weight shift. So again, you might want to re-explore, where are my hands? Where are my feet? Is my head hanging? Is it free? Is my torso soft? And what's happening in my hips and shoulders? What's happening in my hips and shoulders? Am I allowing movement to happen in my weight-bearing side, in my hip and shoulder? And you do a few times with the right side, you do a few times with your left side, and you're really noticing each time you do it, does your hand and foot go back to exactly the same place, or are you recalibrating a little bit? Because once you find your 4 points, no matter what you do, no matter what weight shift you do, you will always return to the same 4 points. That's the theory. Okay, have a stand. See how that feels in standing after that. And then you can lie and have a rest on the ground if you want. Okay, so find your 4 points again and notice, have they changed from the beginning of the lesson, from doing those different variations? And go back to lifting just one at a time. Has anything changed? Right hand, right leg, left leg. Has anything got a little easier from doing? Maybe not. And then could you begin to do the opposite hand and foot? And again, you don't have to keep your arms and legs, the ones that are lifting, really tight. You can just bend the knee and elbow a little bit to lift them. It's not a big lift. We're just looking for that beginning ability to lighten them a little bit away from the ground. So the opposite hand and foot. And what has to happen in your hips and your shoulders? So how can your torso move relative to the weight-bearing hip and shoulder? You're experimenting with where do they go back down. So as I'm doing it, are they going back to the place I lifted them from or somewhere else? So how you'll know when you've got it, when you're getting closer, is they'll all keep returning closer and closer to the point that you lifted them from. Which side? What do you mean by that, Helen? Show me. There's a difference to what it's asking in your torso, but try both of them. Because for you at the moment, it's easier if you sync it. So if we look at Helen again, do it again, Helen. So it's easier. Yeah, absolutely. But you're doing it really nicely. So let's look at how Helen is managing to do it. So she's managing by doing it a lot through her knee to do this movement. No, it's never cheating, Helen. That's your option. So if we look, who else was doing it? Anna, can you do it? There's many ways you can do it. Whichever's easy. So you can see Anna has a side. She goes sideways over the weight-bearing hip. That's her hip movement that she's doing. So over her weight-bearing hip, what would happen, Anna, if you did? Which one are you lifting? So that's going to ask for a very different diagonal that she's not ready to do. So that's what I'm saying. It's not so much whether you're going up or down, but this is a lot about the ability of your torso to move relative to your hips and shoulders. The ability of your torso to move relative to your hips and shoulders. Just Helen, for you, that you can get one arm and leg off the ground, it's fantastic. Not just for you, but and you can keep your balance. So now we're looking for, once you get there, can you find different ways of organising that through your middle. Yeah, but you found your one way. Absolutely. And once you found one, then you've got something you can go from. So how do you keep soft in your upper back? How do you think of that weight-bearing hip and shoulder? That's where all the organisation's happening, in the weight-bearing hip and shoulder. Have a stand, have a walk. So again, because this is such a, as I said, it's everyone will get this, but it's how do you find your full points? That's the big key here. There'll be a point somewhere where you know, if this is my weight-bearing arm, how to move my torso relative to my shoulder. Or a point that I know how to move my pelvis relative to my underneath, to my hip. So go for a walk. And that's what we're exploring. We're not making it happen. We're just seeing by doing all these variations, does the system start to generalize something out of it? And that's what many of you have to learn to trust a little bit more. That if you put the options in there, if you put the variation in there, you're giving your system a chance to find something. And that's where you don't always need that very fine attention. So what I'm saying is variation through lots of different ATMs as well. Not just in this ATM, but this is an ATM that is really asking you to shift your weight and to find different ways to do it. So it comes back to that idea of, you know, the learning stream and the movement stream. So when I'm having difficulty doing something, I want all my learning strategies in place. If I'm getting anxious, I know I've got to find the ground, I've got to spread my attention, I have to slow down, I have to look to reduce the effort, and on we go. There's also within many ATMs, which is a little bit like the one Lisa did this morning and this one here, he's asking you to take, you know, at the beginning, it was, can you take your elbow to the floor and keep your hand on your ankle? So in that, with that sort of constraint, there's no point struggling with it. You can't struggle with something like that if you can't do it. But there's something there that if you go really slowly, really pay attention, is maybe going to ask you to find something in your middle back that doesn't normally move in that way. But you've got to have the quality to go with it. So he's going to, through all these configurations, find shapes that you can make that at the moment aren't even in your awareness. They're not possibilities because they're simply not possibilities. You don't go there. Your head doesn't know how to get into that place where everything in your torso follows it. So these are a way of sort of getting in under your habits, if you like, getting in under that level, you know, because I'll give you a little bit more concrete example. So Arlene Zones, who's a really good friend of mine, gave me this FI, and I'm usually pretty concrete and thing, and all I could get up and say, This is such an Arlene lesson. I said, Arlene, I can't be a bitch here. She's looking at me. I said, no. There's something here that when I go into that, that's when I get into my real, and when that's not there, I've got a possibility that I don't have to respond like that. So that's what I'm saying, getting into these much deeper levels of how we organize ourselves to be who we are. And that's what often these ATMs are giving us the possibility to find in ourselves. Ways simply by unwinding some of these strong patterns we've got of holding ourselves together in particular ways. Okay, find your 4 points again. Let's do another movement to finish with. So let your head hang. So you're not orienting to anywhere in particular. And just see, are your 4 points a little bit different than where you started? Could you now begin to lift your right leg a little bit away from the floor? And notice when you do that, does your pelvis lift on your right side or does it drop down on your right side? Either's fine, but simply notice, what do you do? Do you lift the right side of your pelvis, which means you're lifting your pelvis up over your left hip? Or do you lower the right side of your pelvis, which means you're lowering your pelvis over your left hip? They're very different. Yeah. So with your right, so finding a way to lift it, keep it bent so you're not straightening your leg. You've got that nice soft right leg, and you're now going to lift your right leg and place it down on the floor so that your right knee and your right lower leg is going to be on the floor, and your right knee is going to be between your left hand and your left foot. And your pelvis is where? You can sit down, but don't at the moment. No? So just finding that. And really notice when you do that, where does your right foot end up? Is it still, could it find a way to do this where your right foot might have lifted, but it's still pretty close to where the point was that you would have been standing on? So before you start, to go up again and really get a sense of where's the point where my right foot is in space. Where is it in relationship to both hands and my left foot? So there's a point that my right foot is on, and you're going to lift your right leg a little bit, spiral around. You can sit down now if you want. So you're going to turn 90 degrees to the left. So if you get there, your head will have turned 90 degrees to your left. Yep, I've got it. Yay. But really notice, where's your right foot to be there? Is it near the point where it was, or it's had to move a long way through space to get you here? And up you go again. And the closer that foot can stay to where its point is, just see, does that make a difference to how easily you can come up? So you still lift it a little bit. You're not just spiraling down. You do want to lift the leg a little bit first. And then you just notice, where does my foot end up? So you're spiraling down. Your arms are still facing in exactly the same direction. Sorry, your hands are still facing in the same direction. And your head is turned 90 degrees. And then you just think about, where's the point where my right foot has to return to? And up you go. So is there something about understanding these points? And you go down and then you just go back to the same point. So your foot lifts a little bit, you spiral down, and then you think about, where does my foot have to go back to? And back you go again. Try the same thing to the other side. So again, just notice, think about where my left foot is in relationship to my hands and my right foot. And you're just starting to lift it a little bit, to spiral down. And simply to notice, don't try and keep it on that point for a start. Just see, where do I go? What happens? And what's the difference if I still know where I'm returning to? If I'm still really clear about that point that I'm returning to. And then could you maybe go side to side? So how do you come back to your 4 points? How do you really... So you've got these 4 points that you can keep moving from. And really feel how much is happening in your shoulders and your hips. So your knee is always going to end up between the opposite hand and knee. So whichever knee is spiraling in, it's going to end up between your opposite hand and your knee. So how does that 4 points give you a bit of... Is security the right word? I'm not sure. You know where you're going back to. Okay. Just to finish, come back to your 4 points and see where are your 4 points now, and what's it like to lift your right hand, your left hand, your right foot, your left foot. Has anything got easier? Right hand, left hand, maybe you want to walk a little bit. And you just move one limb at a time. One limb at a time. See, how do you go? One limb at a time. One limb at a time. And how close do your hand and foot on one side come together if you do one limb at a time? How close do the hand and foot on the same side come together? Because this is a lot of what we've been doing, shortening on one side, lengthening on the other. So how close do the hand and foot on one side come together? Okay, have a walk. There's more in the days to come. What's that done to your walking? How do you feel the ground now after that? And how do you feel the movement in your hips and shoulders and your torso? This is what babies learn coming all this into crawling. How they can weight bear through arms and legs and find all of this mobility, all of these possibilities. So see you in the morning, and remember, we're ready to go. Well, 9:30, but 9:45, first lesson starts. And remember, just to think about what feedback questions you're going to ask.